Let's now move to the next keynote speaker. We will listen to Adnan Amin.
Meet Adnan Amin. After serving the United Nations for years, he became the first Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, which has become the authoritative voice of renewable energy, helping to lead the global energy transition. Mr. Amin now serves as a Senior Fellow at Harvard University.
Welcome to our show, Adnan Amin. We are all ears. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And, I'm in Abu Dhabi and I just came back from New York. And in New York, they've just put up this climate clock in Times Square. And looking at that climate clock is in equal parts terrifying and motivating. Terrifying because you realize to prevent catastrophic climate change, you have about 7 years and 100 days. Now, in terms of systemic civilizational change, that's not a hell of a lot of time. But on the other hand, it's probably one of the greatest motivators. When you see a time horizon that has become real, you begin to actually focus your mind to see what's happening. Now, I had the privilege to be the first Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, build a new energy agency for a new time. And it coincided with the beginning of a remarkable revolution in renewables. We had to create a knowledge framework. We had to create an international cooperation framework. We had to create tools to accelerate deployment of renewable energy. And when I reflect back over this decade, what has happened in that time is truly remarkable. We have, as one of your speakers mentioned already, a renewable energy revolution. It's truly a revolution. And it's built on a number of pillars. One of those pillars is innovation and cost decline. We've had cost curves for renewable energy technologies that have been remarkable. Solar, for example, in the last decade, solar PV has fallen by about 90%, onshore wind by about 50%, offshore wind by about 35%. We now have a suite of technologies from solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, which are the cheapest power generation technologies in the world in most places. That's led to an exponential increase. Exponential is our theme, an exponential increase in capacity. For the last decade, almost, new additional capacity added to the global power sector, the majority has come from renewables. That's crept up from 50%, 60%, and last year, 72% of all new power capacity came from renewables. So it was quite remarkable in terms of how quickly that happened. Also, when I started, the share of renewables in the global power system was about 12, 13%. Today, it's 34%. Now, that's in a decade. So remarkable change is happening. And there are three broad trends that have driven this. And I think they're relevant to what we're talking about here. The first is the decarbonization of energy. There is now tremendous pressure on decision makers in the public and the private sector to enact climate policy that begins to decarbonize in line with what we're seeing with climate trends. This kind of pressure is expressed in many different ways, at the ballot box, in democratic societies, but also by consumer behavior and by affecting the social license to operate for polluting businesses. So some of them may well be doing it out of the goodness of their heart and concern for humanity, but many of them are doing it because the bottom line is now beginning to be impacted by climate sentiment and the need to. So this has driven a huge expansion in renewables. The second is decentralization. We now have the possibility that we can have millions of small producers, people owning panels, small communities owning wind turbines, EVs when they come into the system with V2G technology and are connected in as storage. These will all be selling into the electric wholesale market in many countries in the world. And if you look at the interesting example of Germany, Germany has over 6 million people who are participating in the wholesale electricity market today. People who own a panel, electric car, community with a turbine or whatever. So this has actually democratized how energy is going to look in the future. We're not going to have large centralized power generation units that pump out carbon and give you electricity top down. It's going to be a much more decentralized kind of ecosystem. All of this is going to be made possible by what we're seeing in terms of digitalization. Digitalization is enabling us to integrate machine learning and AI algorithms in a way to manage millions of producers and consumers of electricity in a completely different way. I've worked with one very, very interesting technology company that has developed an internet-based platform. They call it the Internet of Energy, which allows you to manage smart installations in buildings, transportation assets, energy efficiency, demand response, being able to manage how consumers use electricity in more rational ways. And that has been done because we now have the possibility of digital interfaces. When electric mobility comes into the system at scale, it is going to provide us with the possibility for remote charging, for managing storage on the grid, and providing flexibility to our power systems in the future. So this is an extraordinary thing that has happened. So exponential change is happening. My question has always been, is it happening quick enough for us to forestall the major change that we see coming? And here, the jury is still out, and I think this is why fora like this are so important, is to energize people to begin to understand that there is something that they can do about this. We are seeing huge changes happening. The biggest and interesting surprise for me was from BP, which has always been a bit of a laggard in this respect, who've not only announced a carbon neutrality target, they came out with a very consequential scenario, which actually gives you a very clear perspective that perhaps we have passed peak demand in oil. That is a huge statement. If you pass peak demand in oil, it triggers all kinds of consequences in the oil and gas sector, which includes cost of investment going up, it includes cost of doing business, it includes what the market price for oil in the future is expected to be, and so on. And that's consistent with what we're seeing with the collapse of shale in the United States, where we've seen almost 190 companies go out of business, go into bankruptcy. Producers that are indebted up to $50 billion are unable to pay their debts. And you realize that this whole fossil system has actually been based a little bit on a house of cards of debt. That same financing capability has not been provided to renewables. We need to stop fossil fuel subsidy today. We need to overcome the force of incumbency that acts on the political system and makes it so. And we need to level the playing field for renewables. And then we will see massive change begin. I think two other major announcements that are going to make a huge exponential difference. I cannot underscore how significant the Chinese announcement at the General Assembly is. If you are going for carbon neutrality for an economy the size of China by 2060, with midway targets in 2030, including 20% of renewables in the system and so on, it implies a massive change. I've done a lot of work in China. I've been observing Chinese companies and government policy. I've participated in discussions on the various 5-year plans. And what I see happening is this is a very strategically important move because the Chinese have already invested massively in R&D and innovation, especially in batteries, electric mobility, ultra-high voltage cables, and so on. They are at a point as the biggest installer of renewables and technology innovation in renewables to be the next energy superpower if that is what they are minded to do. The EU commitment is also extremely significant. It builds on it. But we always talk about the United States in the current context as not doing much. There are two very important things that have happened. Gavin Newsom in California just announced that they will phase out EVs by 2035. They will incentivize renewables. California is one of the biggest auto markets in the world. That is going to drive EV development and penetration very, very fast. So the last one I want to mention very quickly is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in the United States has just the other day authorized energy producers, which can be as small as a panel or an EV battery or whatever, to be able to sell electricity into the US wholesale market. That's a game changer, because up to now, the US decentralized generation had always been somewhat problematic in policy terms, but we see a momentum now, which is going to be a US-wide momentum, which has already been led by large companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, who have committed to 100% renewable energy. So I see everything happening. What we need now is everybody who's listening, especially the young people, need to understand that their choices and their voices are going to be central to how decision makers will make decisions in the future. And we have to keep working for this change to happen very, very fast. Thank you. Hope I wasn't too long.
No, you were absolutely not too long. This was very interesting. And you outline many different perspectives of this exponential drop in this section. But could you just single out, maybe to simplify it even more, what is required to make this exponential development of renewables to continue?
Well, I think that one of the key things that we need to do is, boring as it might sound, is to work on policy. I mentioned phasing out fossil fuel subsidies, but we need to rationalize policy with regard to electricity markets worldwide to enable electricity markets to function better. We need to be able to account for the fact that new markets will have many players. We need to incentivize the digitalization of energy at a much faster rate than is happening right now. Just to give you an example of why it's so important. I worked with a TSO, a transmission system operator in northern Germany called 50 Hertz, which had installed 55% variable renewable energy in their system. They had interconnections to different other economies and so on. But they had a digitalized system which had enabled them through their learning algorithms to forecast solar and wind yield the next day, 24 hours ahead, with 96% accuracy. That's one element of digitalization. The other was that the interconnection of millions of devices with these systems and with the authorization of the owners of these devices allows you to do demand response, meaning that you can have a contract with people who own refrigerators or washing machines or dryers or whatever, saying that we will sell you cheaper electricity if you let us decide the optimal times where your machines should be working. So you can balance out the use of electricity. So these are the kind of things that are happening. But I think that the main thing that we can do is support innovation. If you look at innovation in digitalization, if you look at innovation, for example, in next generation solar, I'm very excited about the possibility of perovskite cells. This is the next generation thin film solar you can put on windows. We are almost at the level where commercialization will happen. This will drop the price of solar by another multiple. We'll get towards zero cost electricity quicker than we do. So we need to have market design that enables us to manage that. The floating wind turbines we're seeing. There's one of Norway, of Scotland, there's one of Japan. These are beginning to lower the cost of offshore electricity generation in massive ways. And I think that there's a huge potential for that. But the most important way to invest, and we're seeing that investment happening, is in batteries. We have a cost curve for batteries that is declining faster than the solar cost curve did. Batteries will be the enabler of electric mobility and grid stability in the future. And I think that we need to have massive investment there. But, the consumers need to make decisions. Everybody who's watching here, try to incentivize buying an electric car, low emission vehicles, moving in the direction of technology, enabling you to do things. It'll lower your costs in the long term also. So I think that'll be a win-win scenario.
Well, thank you so much, Adnan and Amin. We'll move now to the first panelist.
This is Jonas Eklind, the CEO of Azelio, a Swedish cleantech pioneer focused on transforming the future of renewable energy. Azelio engages in distributed and dispatchable renewable energy through its long-duration energy storage system, the TESS Pod. With around-the-clock clean power production, the TESS Pod aims to accelerate the transition to renewable energy with the potential to improve the lives of millions around the world. Azelio provides clean, reliable and affordable energy in some of the world's leading renewable energy development arenas to overcome one of the last major obstacles of a greener future, long-duration renewable energy storage.
Hi there, Jonas. I'd like to ask you, what role can your technique with long-duration storage, how can this enable the reduction of CO2 emissions around the world, and how can you scale this technique fast?
For zero emissions, long duration energy storage is of course a must to transform intermittent renewable energy into dispatchable baseload power. And what Azelio does is that we replace fossil fuels with renewable energy. And when doing that, we can reduce CO2 emissions by up to 98% to replace fossil with renewables.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Let's move to the next panelist.
Meet Dorothée, head of the Sustainable Business Team at Vodafone Group. Together with her team, Dorothée supports the delivery of Vodafone's contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as ensuring sound sustainable business practices and transparent reporting. Vodafone aims to halve their carbon emissions by 2025 and to reach net zero by 2050, at the latest. Through connectivity and the Internet of Things, the company hopes to enable their customers to save 350 million tons of CO2 emissions over the next decade.
Hello, Dorothée. Could you please elaborate on the application of Internet of Things to reduce the emissions really quickly?
Wonderful, thank you. Hello from London, where autumn has started. It's really great to be here, and of course, very happy to elaborate on your questions. So let me bring Adnan's point a bit to life. We estimate that 1/3 of the over 100 million IoT connections that we operate directly enable our customers to reduce their emissions, and we expect that proportion to increase over time. And by the way, talking about exponential, because that's a word that we need to mention here, by 2025, the Internet of Things connections are expected to reach 25 billion. So let me give you two quick examples from the energy space. One is obviously smart energy meters, which allow businesses, households to monitor, manage, and reduce their energy. And for domestic smart meters, for example, the average electricity and gas usage reductions is assumed to be 3% and 2% respectively. And for commercial metering, it's even up to 17%. And so through the more than 12 million smart meters connections using our IoT that we have, we can save an estimated 1.6 million tons of CO2. Very quick second example, smart grids. Again, Adnan hinted at it as well. Identifying and validating distributed generation assets and renewable energy resources. So, recognizing the wind turbines, the batteries, the heat pumps, the solar panels, and then also connecting them securely and safely into grid network is really essential to keep the grids stable. So before the summer, we partnered with blockchain consortium Energy Web Foundation to really optimize the integration of renewables and distributed energy resources into the grid. And that obviously helps to decarbonize.
Thank you very much, Dorothée. Let's move to the next panelist.
Meet Dale Vince. He's been a green entrepreneur for 25 years, since founding the world's first green energy company, Ecotricity, which now powers 200,000 homes and businesses in the UK with green energy. Ecotricity also launched Europe's first national electric vehicle charging network, the Electric Highway. Dale is a UN climate champion for sport and chairman of the Forest Green Rovers, recognized by FIFA as the world's greenest football club.
Hi, Dale. Great to have you on our show. You've been doing this for quite a while from different perspectives. What is your take on the exponential development in this sector?
Yeah, I think it's happening on a number of different fronts. We began in the mid-90s focused on changing the way energy was made because it was the biggest single, electricity in particular, biggest single source of carbon emissions in our country. But our mission evolved to include energy, transport, and food when we discovered that those three areas of life are responsible for 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint. It's become central to our mission to be able to say to people that actually you don't have to wait for governments or for business to act, because the things that you spend money on every day, how you power your home, how you travel, and what you eat are the biggest single drivers of your carbon footprint and the world's problems. And I think we're seeing exponential change in renewable energy, in the electrification of transport, and in the rise of plant-based eating. And all of these are the keys to getting to zero carbon.
Thank you very much, Dale. Let's now move back to all of the panelists here. And Adnan, I'm sure you have some interesting questions for the panelists.
Oh, absolutely. Just with Dale first. First time I've heard about the Green Rovers, and I'm tempted to leave Manchester United after the last performance. So you might see me. But awesome. It's very interesting what you're saying, Dale, about mobility. I understand that you do a lot with charging infrastructure for vehicles. I know that nearly every oil company that wants to transition to becoming an integrated energy company, is how they describe themselves now, are investing in charging infrastructure. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're looking at this and what it means for you in the UK?
Yeah, we began about 10 years ago when we built a car. I was looking for a greener car, and it was before electric cars were in the world, so we made one called the Nemesis. And the experience of putting that on the road led us to understand that what was really going to hold take-up back was the infrastructure, the ability to charge cars. We could see manufacturers beginning to prepare to make cars or actually put them on the road, but there was nowhere to charge. It was a chicken and egg thing. People wouldn't buy cars if they couldn't charge them, and nobody would build chargers because nobody had cars. And so we began 10 years ago with a three-pin, this is a UK standard, 3-pin plug, which is domestic on the motorways of Britain. And it's grown really rapidly. We power probably 1.5 million miles of driving every month now in Britain. We've covered the length and breadth of our country, and we power it from renewable energy, because one of our big arguments and points of information is having an electric car is good, but it is not the end of the game. You've got to run it on renewable energy to get to zero carbon emissions. And I think we've seen such a rapid take-up of electric vehicles and of charging in the last couple of years in particular. Our government announced 2030 for the date by which new internal combustion engine cars won't be on sale in Britain. I think they're simply following the curve. I think by 2025, I think the actual cost of ownership and the cost of initial purchase of an EV will be lower than an ICE car. And I think it'll be a major tipping point. So I think what our government have done looks a little bit bold, maybe from a government perspective, but it's actually probably behind what the market is going to deliver.
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more with renewable technology and EVs. And I agree with you, 2025 or even earlier, incidentally, could be a tipping point. What is the level of utilization of your charging infrastructure now? Does it pay you to do it?
No, it's a loss-making operation. It has been for 10 years. And the level of utilization, it barely gets out of low single digits of percentage. Maybe it's 2 or 3% or something like that. But the challenge, like running a grid, is to manage the peaks. Because although the overall average may be 3%, it's the peaks where you have problems. If people have to queue, then that becomes a problem. So our job in 10 years has been to keep pace with changing technology. We began with the Japanese standard CHAdeMO. There was a European one, and then CCS came along, the big European one, which I think will be the dominant tech in the future. But also, we went from 13 amps, we went to 50 kilowatts, and of course, 150 kilowatts is in the world today. So we have to keep pace with changing tech, and actually with pump numbers, we call them electricity pumps, so that we suppress the peaks so that people can always access a pump when they need one. It's a challenging job.
Excellent. And you're connected to the grid. Do you have a bi-directional connection?
Yeah, all of our pumps are connected to the grid. It's not bi-directional because we just take power at the pump. But as we are an energy company, Ecotricity, and so we put our wind and solar power into the grid in different parts of the world. And you're right. What you say about oil companies, you're quite right. They're moving into this space, but and I heard what you said earlier as well about the need for the big oil companies to change their model and basically to become renewable energy companies. We can see that happening now, big time. BP are a good example.
Yeah, great.
Do you have any questions for Jonas or Dorothée?
Yes. Very quickly to Dorothée. I think we're on the same page with digitalization and intelligent systems and smart cities and all of that. Do you see this moving very fast? And do you think the advent of 5G will have an impact? And what kind of impact do you think that'll have?
An exponential impact would be my very short answer. So yes, indeed, that's 5G is a game changer in terms of the low latency, the applications, etc. But then also there's a lot of narrowband IoT solutions that use kind of very little energy and are also really helpful in driving this forward. So the potential is phenomenal, and it's also very much needed, right? Because if we want to get where we need to get to, then digitalization is really the way to kind of speed up the scale and the speed of this revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you look at the fact now, we have the Internet of Energy or the Internet of Things. We have millions of devices connected. We have new ways of using energy. What do you think that does for the stability of our grid? And what needs to be done to ensure that we have a robust grid in the future, apart from physical upgrades?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I think that's where the AI, the big data, the IoT obviously comes in a big way to ensure that the grid can remain stable, as so many different distributed energy resources need to be kind of checked and integrated in the right way. So I think that's exactly where there's a lot more work needed and where the huge potential is, because the whole energy system is obviously becoming much more decentralized and distributed.
Are a lot of phone companies going in the same direction as Vodafone?
In terms of, I think we're the leader in IoT, but there's definitely, I mean, connectivity as such is really the basis of all this, right? So in that sense, the telcos are definitely seeing an opportunity there.
Great,
thank you,
Jonas. If I can turn to Jonas just very quickly, you said very interestingly that you're decarbonizing electricity and providing renewable energy in a dispatchable way. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the technology you're using? And is this aggregators? You have batteries? What is it that you're doing exactly?
What we do is that we store renewable energy as thermal energy, and that's a very low-cost way of storing. And that's why we can provide this long-duration energy storage to a very low cost and to a very good performance. And then we can build these decentralized and distributed long-duration energy storage solutions that provides baseload in a distributed and decentralized way. And we can provide solar energy 24 hours a day.
Take a comparison with geothermal, which is basically dispatchable baseload also. It's not available everywhere. Maybe yours is. How would you do a cost comparison with geothermal and what you're providing?
I mean, geothermal, then you have to have the geothermal energy where you need it. What we provide is that you can store solar and wind energy wherever you are in any place on the globe. And then you can provide dispatchable renewable energy 24 hours a day. So the source is normally solar, but it can be any type of renewables. But the cheapest way to charge the system is today with solar energy.
Great. Thank you very much. Super panel, I must say. Very, very inspiring to listen to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Admin. Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask some questions too here. Jonas, how can the energy storage be scaled in the same capacity as we have been seeing it in terms of renewables before?
Yeah, we have a modular solution that's produced in high volume production methods. So we can put up a lot of distributed systems around the globe. And we have today cooperations with companies in India, in North America, in Latin America, in Africa and Middle East. and we are into delivering these distributed and decentralized energy storage solutions right now.
Fascinating. Dorothée, could you explain a little bit more about the enablement potential is how it's calculated, and how can you give more examples of this in action? For instance, in cities. That was difficult to say.
Sure, wonderful. So as it was said in the video, we have set a target of enabling the reduction of 350 million tons of carbon emissions between now and 2030 through our IoT offers. And so let me start by saying that when we are calculating this, we are working with the experts to help us. So we've been working with Carbon Trust to identify how our products and services, so basically the IoT use cases, help our customers avoid energy or fuel. So for each of those services, we calculate an emission reduction enablement factor, which is based on external research, some of our internal data, expert assumptions, etc., and taking also into account, obviously, all the pathways of decarbonization of the grids in the different countries. And then in that, we also acknowledge that obviously there are a number of suppliers contributing to that potential. So this is not about claiming that the avoided emissions are our own. It's just that we are helping enabling them. And then for each product or service, a unit of sale is identified. So at the end of the year, we multiply the sales by the factor for each of the categories. You add it up and we get to our number. And so in 2019, to give you an example, the IoT technologies and services helped avoid 5.9 million tons of CO2. So that's quite a great number. And to the second element of your question, to bring it to life a bit through the cities angle, because cities, I mean, for me, cities is where it all comes together, really, in the action, right, in a holistic way, because, you know, over half of the population lives in cities, but a huge amount of the greenhouse gas emissions obviously come from cities as well. And digitalization can really play a key role in tackling so many of the challenges, whether it's air quality, public transport, energy efficiency, waste management, you name it, improving building standards, etc. And in fact, just recently, the Mission Board for Climate Neutral and Smart Cities of the European Commission announced that they want to get to 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. So that's a huge opportunity where digitalization will need to play a crucial part. And to give you one example, in Guadalajara, in Spain, we worked with the municipal authority, and about 15,000, I think, LED lights were connected to a central management system. And then by doing that, we managed to help the municipality reduce street lighting energy consumption by 68%. So that is quite an astonishing number. So that is just street lighting. Then add in how you can kind of reroute traffic around congestion, how you can make sure there's automatic repairs scheduled, how you even can make sure that bins on the streets only get emptied when they're full. And so the trucks are not driving around, you know, to pass by empty bins. So that's really the size of the potential.
Well, thank you very much, Dorothée. I have a question for you, Dale, but I'm going to save it until after the questions from the audience. So let's bring back Nick Nuttall.
Yeah, hi. Very nice to see everybody again. Nice to see everybody on the screen as well. Look, I'm going to keep it brief because I know we're actually running a bit out of time. Just wanted to let everybody know there's the evidence. You're all being live drawn by Megan Herbert, a wonderful award-winning illustrator, and you'll be able to see that up on Twitter. That's you, Adnan. So, yeah, get used to it. And the other question now is just a simple one. We haven't got food on this show, but I've got one question from the audience. Dale, Forest Green Rovers, how did you persuade British football fans to eat vegan pies?
Well, I want to say it was easy, actually. And there was a little bit of consternation at the beginning, I would say. You know, some fans were a little bit, what's happening here? This is football. And this is not the food we expect, you know. But we said to our fans, football is 2 hours a fortnight. Why don't you come and try some different kind of food? And by the way, you know, these are the reasons why it's important to stop eating meat and dairy. It's an ethical, environment and human health issue. But come and try our food. And then we made some fantastic food. And the bar in football food is really quite low. So our food stands out, and our fans came and tried it and loved it. Away fans came and tried it and loved it. And it's become something that the club has been famous for. Or is famous for, rather. So it's, you know, it's become something. It's turbocharged FGR. At the beginning, people said, "Oh, it'll inhibit the club. It will hurt the fan base." It's done the very opposite.
Fantastic. Actually, Nick just nicked my question.
All right, well, then I have one other question which is really important. Okay, everyone's talking about digitalization, but there's a public out there, and several people have asked the question: who owns the data that you collect at Vodafone, or Jonas, you might collect, Dale, I don't know, Adnan, if you're collecting data. Who owns the data? Can the public feel their privacy is secure under this revolution in digitalization?
That's a valid question.
Who wants to take that? Adnan does.
Go ahead, Adnan.
Okay, let me venture into this one. I think we're going to have to deal with the reality more and more that all our data will not be secure. I think you cannot have data exclusivity unless you have a notebook into which you're writing and then you put it in your pocket. In this day and age, data has become a commodity, a business tool, an asset, and people use it for so many things. I think what we really need to do is have an understanding of how data can be made more anonymous, how security protocols around the use of data need to be implemented. Unfortunately, we're living at a time, Nick, as you know, where multilateralism is not held in very high regard, and having binding normative agreements at the international level is becoming more and more difficult. But I think this is an area that if we are going to have the confidence of the public in the momentum that we have towards digitalization and technological development, then we have to do something about this. And I think right now we don't have the right tools in place.
Well, thank you very much, Adnan. Thank you very much, Jonas, Dorothée, and Dale, for staying with us now and sharing your insights. And thank you, Nick.